This is day 3 of the May 91 7-day retreat at Springwater. Here are some more questions. Why do we get irritated? As an example, when someone sits down next to you and chews very loudly their food. In wondering about this, I remembered my father admonishing me at the table in no uncertain terms to eat quietly. But just remembering that incident does not seem to alleviate the irritation, at least not immediately. This question came up in a group, and someone else asked, is it that we feel put upon by someone else making noise? Is our basic insecurity the cause for wanting a quiet space of clarity here? Not to be disturbed by someone else sitting next to us making noise. I'll just repeat the first questions. Why do we get irritated? For example, when someone sits down next to you and chews very noisily. Remember my father admonishing me at the table to eat quietly, but just remembering that doesn't seem to alleviate the irritation. I'm doing so many things obsessively, cleaning, washing, taking care of clients, and by the time midnight comes around, I'm exhausted, without having found some quiet time to sit. Only by being here do I see the misery that these obsessions cause me, the violence that they do to my life. What is awareness? What is consciousness? It seems that all my life I have felt a deep sadness. Even when feeling all right for a while, this sadness is but an inch away. With all the tremendous sadness in the world, and hearing you and others say that humanity is all one, could it be that in addition to my own sadness, I also feel that of other people? Yesterday you mentioned that someone asked whether it is enough to be aware of thoughts and feelings with an occasional clarity and insight happening in between. I'm wondering about where this thought, is it enough, comes from. Does it arise out of conflict? The conflict which arises when I think about the many other spiritual centers and traditions where I may find something that I don't seem to get here. I wish you would say something more about the feeling of isolation that comes with doing this work, not having peers, friends to share with. At times I would love to share what I do here, or this work in general, with someone else, but I do not find resonance. Why do we want to share things, including clarity, understanding? Since this question came up before, and several people wanted to talk more about it, look more into it. Let's do that this morning. In doing this work, one finds there are fewer people, or maybe no people, maybe of one's common, conventional circle, with whom one can share what is going on. And as the person yesterday said, an increasing feeling of loneliness happening, feeling isolated from others, who either do not understand what one is doing or don't want to hear about it, are not interested. How to live with that? Is that the question? Or as one other person added, why do I want to share in the first place? That person also said, when I'm with my children, grandchildren, where I wouldn't even think of sharing this work, I don't feel isolated. I don't feel separate or lonely. But with the person I would like to share this, it's not possible. And there comes the isolation, feeling turned off, or maybe rebuffed, or person turning away, withdrawing from this whole question, or maybe even putting one down for doing it. This is another whole side of it, which we may come to later. Things may be projected onto one for doing this. We'll not make it too complicated. Is this a good question to look at? That coming to a place, coming to retreat, and maybe at home spending quiet time, wondering about oneself, wondering about one's reactions, listening to birds and chainsaws in an interested way, or at times in an agonized way, maybe irritated, because it intrudes into one's space. The chainsaw more than the birds. The chewing food of someone next to me intrudes more than a bird, or birds fighting over food. Crows can be tremendously vociferous. There seems to be something romantic about hearing birds. Even if they're fighting crows. So being interested in all of this, why do I get irritated? Why do I get hurt? What is it that gets hurt? Not just, we find lots of peers if we share our feelings about someone else who irritated us. There's always someone who will become an ally and help in putting down another person or talking about him or her, what he does, how insensitive he is, or mean, or whatever. But if one says, well, I'm really wondering why I myself get hurt, what gets irritated? or one suggests to look at that together, one may not find resonance. And therefore, is one losing friends, peers? The people one used to talk to about other matters, and now this becomes very important to one. And one wants to have just as usual interest in it, sharing, and it isn't coming forth. The other person indicates, leave me alone with this. Or begins to make irritated statements. Or just not tune in. The tuning in isn't there that used to be there when we talked about other things and did other things together. Is one mourning that, the loss of the friends who used to share and tune in? And now they're not. Now they're tuning in with their friends who used to also be my friends, but I'm not part of that. Why am I not part of what I used to talk about with people, used to do? Is it that it's not interesting to me anymore? Or do I look down on people who have these sort of lesser interests, lesser concerns? Then there's a real gap forming, isn't there? If there is a looking down on, because I feel separate with my better interests, better concerns, there's comparison going on, which does not get lost on my friends either. They feel that somehow. Is that what's going on? I'm not saying it is. We're looking at the whole thing as thoroughly as possible, making allowance for the fact that we won't think of everything. So if somebody needs to bring up something that has not been thought about, it doesn't mean that I feel this is not important. I don't think of everything. So there are meetings for that, group or individual meetings. So what is that state of separation between me and the others? That I just don't care anymore for what they're doing? Then can one let that be? Not want it to be otherwise? Not bothering oneself or others to change, to come around, mourning, which means remembering the good old times, a video of how we used to chat and be together, have a good time, and then the storyline, I don't have this anymore, I've lost it. And with that, of course, comes sadness. The storyline that we have about the events that take place in our life have a definite emotional impact on this organism. Just saying to oneself, I feel so isolated, I have no friends, can bring tears up, can't it? I'm not saying this is what the person was doing who brought the question up. We're looking at it very generally, not so personally. And yet each one of us can look, because it applies to all of us, doesn't it? All these possibilities are there for every one of us. To feel lonely because what I'm interested in, you're not interested in. And I want to share and I can't. So I make a sentence out of it, a line, a story, and get affected by it. One could ask why, if it's not that I just don't care anymore to be with these people, not that I hate them or don't like them, but what they're into is not my interest anymore, then it's a very clean departure. It happens throughout our life. We make new friends, find people with new interests that are common to us, or that spark an interest in ourselves, has happened all along. Why mourn about it? Sometimes we are collectors of people. We don't want to let go of them. I used to be a collector of people. When Christmas time came, I think we wrote up to 260 Christmas cards. All the friends in other countries I had met, where I had lived, never wanting to let go, to lose touch. Not that one really had touch by sending a Christmas card and getting one. The touch is often very rote. And then with less and less time for this and really wondering about this whole thing, we changed our policy. We only wrote to people who wrote to us. It sounds selfish. But it worked very well. 210 people dropped out. 50 is more manageable, postage-wise, time-wise. But I know other friends who still have that contact with these same people 40, 50 years ago. So, is that what is going on in one? One collects stamps, one collects dishes, one collects people. The feeling, I have lots of friends. Again, the saying this to oneself can do something. And when one can't say that anymore, does it bring a pain? We're looking at it, wondering about it. Because when one sees something, it can transform or drop away so much easier than when it's not seen and it just drags along with all the dross we carry. But let's say I have some time to be with people, even though they don't share what I'm doing. Or they invite me, we meet. Why can't we just be together on whatever terms are given at this moment? Like the woman said, when I'm with my children and grandchildren, I don't think of needing to share what I do here. It wouldn't even occur to me to talk about it. We're just together doing whatever, playing or shopping. It may be a real art to be with each other on the terms that are given and not think of other terms, which brings in the irritation. I wish you were different. You could share with me. We don't have to convert each other. It's really completely not necessary. The amazing thing about this work is that people who are interested in it find each other in some unexplainable way. And if there's a real need to be with people who are interested in this, one can come here. We've now started discussion groups in a retreat. Outside of retreat, one can talk with people who are living here as residents. There are also discussions, smaller retreats going on. There's an opportunity to find people if one really needs to be with people who do this, what we call this work, of no work, just looking and listening, quietly and sharing. Or, well, what is sharing? We'll come to that. So when there comes this ability to be with someone, leaving behind all my interests or the thought about them, and just being with whatever's going on with someone, with a family, with an old friend or a new friend, then isn't this work also going on of being unconditionally with what is there, without wanting it to be different? Being aware that if the fantasy comes up, it should be different, the irritation sets in, and learning about that. Not irritation alone, but a feeling of isolation, self-pity, brought about by the way we talk to ourselves about our sad condition. To learn about all of that. We can learn it with people who are into learning this or who are not. We don't need to feel separated from anyone or anything. How does the separation happen? Let's watch it. One big factor is the way we think about the situation, about ourselves and so forth. And watching that these thoughts go on and that they create feelings of division, one can wonder whether these thoughts have to continue going on, or whether they can just be without description, constant commentary with what is going on right now with the people I'm with. The family, the kids, people on a bus, in the doctor's office, in the store, standing in line, chatting. This work, or this looking, this listening, in touchness with what is, does not depend on people with whom one can share it. It's a marvelous thing if that happens, but it doesn't depend on it. There can be a real loving joy arising in one, or joyful love, or whatever you want to call it, lovingness. Cheer, good cheer, can arise in one knows not where from. Not necessarily kindled by someone else. But when we get together, it can operate together. And who knows what it does to someone else? It's different, isn't it, if we meet someone who looks glum or withdrawn or irritated, or someone who is openly cheerful. Not put on, I don't mean a put on cheer, put on smile or so. But a genuine, free joyousness or openness. We feel drawn to that, to share in that, even if we're not interested about what the person does in a retreat. Interest may arise, or people tell me that every once in a while a friend says, where do you get this sort of sense of stillness that I feel sometimes in you, or whatever, some stability? Tell me something about it. Because I don't feel that at all, but when I come together with you, I sense that. I want to know more about it or find out about it. I know you're doing something there every once in a while. What is it? So then it happens. That can happen anytime. But one can't go after it. Try to win and influence people. Not with this. And I wouldn't recommend it to anybody to do, because the work is too hard, too painful in its depth, at times at least, when it is revealed how we are this moment, which does not conform to the idea I had I was. When our anger reveals itself, or irritation, annoyance, or maybe jealousy or envy. Because we don't talk here a great deal about the state of perfection or wholeness or true nature, blissful oneness or whatever. We talk much more, give much more attention to what keeps us enclosed and isolated, in pain and misery. Looking at that, looking at fear, at our obsessions and how miserable they make us, and wondering about that. And it takes a certain strength and interest in that to stay with it. Not to get so upset over it or scared by it. or sick of it, that one needs distraction and escape. Which doesn't mean it doesn't happen here. The escape route is always there, right into the video chamber of the brain, to think of nicer things or dream of better days in the past or in the future. But there's less distraction here. Much less opportunity for forgetting about this whole thing about myself, my relationship with people and so forth. So, I've never ever been missionizing about this work, giving away books or so. Although people tell me, somebody gave me a book and that's why I'm here, and I love it. So, I just say what I don't do. Maybe it's still different. But coming back to this question, did we talk enough about feeling isolated? Yeah, questioning deeply the sense of isolation, whether that is because somebody doesn't show interest for my work, or does it come from someplace else? From wanting, encapsulation in me and my needs, for friends, for sharing, for support. And diving into this neediness itself, into this constant, bottomless state of wanting. Or maybe it isn't bottomless, it just feels that way. Maybe it has an end. We talked about that this morning with someone, saying if one ever watches a tree being transplanted and a two-handed digger goes into the ground with deep, strong claws and goes hopefully so deep that all the last bit of feeder roots are lifted up together with this tree. The whole ball comes out. Roots don't go on indefinitely, although sometimes it seems this way, particularly if one digs dandelions. They seem to have no end. But they do have. Roots have an end. They don't go on forever. Neediness, wanting, has an end. It can come to an end. One can get to the bottom of it, not oneself. When there is not this self-concern, but just wondering about wanting and listening to it all the way, quietly, without wanting want to end. Do you get it? Listening to want without wanting it to end. Just, what is this? And staying with it, the pain of it, the hunger of it, how it incites the imagination to picture things, states. Samadhi, somebody talked, so obsessed with getting samadhi. That's fantasy working out of want, out of neediness, out of insecurity. And insecurity is tied up with feeling I am a separate individual. And not just attached to it. Not just lightly, but thoroughly, unconsciously attached to this idea. I'm a separate individual. And with the attachment goes the fear. What would I be if I wasn't? So this is what one needs to go into deeply. One wants to find out about this feeling of isolation from friends and peers. Because as long as we have someone to share, to support us, we may never dig deep down to the last feeder root. Does that sound scary? Or imaginative? It is a metaphor, the digging up of a tree, and it's a dangerous one because quite a number of us probably have vowed for years to dig up, or what did we say? We will uproot. I will... Endless blind passions I vow to uproot. Yeah. We're not talking about uprooting, wanting, but to find out about it, you have to find out about the whole thing and what feeds it. The whole thing has to be found out, not just partially. Whether it's uprooted or not, when one gets to the bottom of it, let's find out, not expect it. So it's not a question of getting rid of it, but gaining understanding, insight into it, deeply, wholesomely, wanting and isolation that it comes from and that it creates, both. And now to this question, why do I want to share? Which came out of it for one person. Said, with my kids, children, I don't feel a need of sharing, but there's particularly one person I would like to share this with and I can't. Why do I want to share it? We have to ask ourselves that. If there is this need to share and feeling rebuffed for someone not wanting to share. And then, as another person said, often getting into sort of semi-violent means to try to convince somebody that this is the right thing to do and the only thing to do. Where am I coming from with all of that? Can one look at it and wonder about it? Not just wonder about the density and hopelessness of the other person, or however one pictures it to oneself, to salvage something in oneself. I was interested in the last retreat in California. A woman came into a meeting, and she had just sat before the meeting at a door where 2 huge butterflies had just crept out, so it looked. They didn't have their wings quite spread yet. They just crept out of their cocoon. They were enormous. Each one had a big eye on the wing that looked at you when you looked at it. And she came in, she says, come, she was waving me on. We went down the hall and both stared at this butterfly and oh'd and awed. Awed too. And later on in a group meeting, she said this. She said, sometime this morning, something dropped off. And there was just the joyous aliveness of everything, this whole universe, myself not separate from it. An immense joy. At that moment, I had no thought, I want to share this. It was just alive. But when I saw those 2 butterflies later, I thought, who can I share this with? I want to share this with Toni. And in looking quite critically at herself, by critically I mean not judgmentally, but thoroughly, she said there was something of me in there that wanted to be the one who showed her and get something out of it. By being the one who had discovered these butterflies and now got her to oh and ah. And it was very clear to her and to me too, that there is a state in which the thought, I need to share, doesn't come up. And yet, we're talking to each other, right? I hear you thinking or saying, well, aren't you doing this because you want to share? Why am I doing this talking? You're here already. You've come here. To look, maybe, to find out something. And in talking about something that is very important, very precious, very life-giving, vital. Am I doing this to satisfy myself? I'm asking it right now and looking. but the feeling of self isn't even there. We're talking and listening together at something. And that has its own beauty and strength and energy. One wouldn't want to crawl right now into this little cage of self-satisfaction, which is so isolating, even though it has its own little cagey energy at times. And there's not even a felt insistence that you understand this, or that we understand this together. We do or we don't, and that's that. And if someone says, I didn't understand it, I didn't get it, we'll look again. Not, well, why didn't you? How many more times? This is our conventional way of teaching. Needing to get results and so forth. We do want to share things, don't we? And can there be a sharing which isn't just for self-satisfaction? To listen and look together, and yet not to mind being alone in this. Alone meaning not dependent on approval or feedback. It's nice. Feedback is nice, but it's not vital. It's vital for the cage to support and sustain the cage. We need feedback, approval, and of course we get devastated by disapproval, irritated, upset, angry, and so forth. But in this dimension of looking not from this cage, but just looking openly, widely, feedback is not vitally important. Because this thing lives on its own energy. Not kindled by human thought, or wish, or want, or desire. That's what brings me to something somebody asked this morning. Person saying, I only realize now how much our energy depends on looking forward to something. And we all know that, don't we? If something looms in the future, tomorrow, or in a month, or whenever, maybe this noon, a good meal, just thinking of it, one thought can already inject some happy energies, feeling a boost. And the person continued, right now, having gone through a tremendous amount of misery, disappointment, upset, I'm not looking forward to anything. And I'm leery of what will come in the future, because more of the same may happen. I never expected it before, but now that it has happened, it may happen again. So where does one get one's energy? The person asked. Where does energy come from if not from looking forward to things? It's an immensely important question. And not to conclude that if we have nothing to look forward to, we might as well give up. Or the depression that sets in spells that out, give up. There's nothing to look forward to. Life is one ongoing misery. And there are human beings all over the world, not individual cases, but by the thousands, hundred thousands of millions, if not millions, who have nothing to look forward to. And their eyes, if one sees them on the news, are drained of joy. Children without a smile. Or sometimes if the camera holds still for a moment with a child, one wonders what do these big, smileless eyes see? They often seem to manifest such age, such maturity. Who knows? I'm not saying we shouldn't look forward to things. It happens on its own. We're all engaged in something or other. A garden that begins to bloom, a house that begins to take shape. You don't have to look forward to the green, it's there. So we're not condemning that. It's an ingredient of our limited life. But the question was, if there's nothing I'm looking forward to, where does the energy come from to live? And not just to drag along, but to be alive. And thinking again of little children, when they're very little and they are a bundle of energy, it's beginning to crawl. They're not looking forward to walking, they're crawling. Trying to pull themselves up maybe, but I don't know whether they're trying to get up, they're just pulling themselves up because there's something there, and maybe there are all kind of genetic programs too, who knows. But there's aliveness without a lot of stuff in the mind already deposited to look forward to. Why do we lose this aliveness that we all had as little children? And is it irrevocably lost to a human being that was once an alive, energetic, interested, getting into everything child? Obviously there's energy in this universe, isn't there? One just needs to look out the window here. The birds flying and singing. The profusion of leaves and foliage. I remember reading one blade of grass pushing up the equivalent of 450 pounds of weight. Exerting that work, that energy. Why are we cut off from it? Because if we feel only energized by the things we're looking forward to in our video chamber, we're cut off from an immense energy that is at work all around us, above us, below us, in the midst, everywhere. Making this heart beat and the food being digested. Because our organism is affected by depression and may work less vitally. So can one wonder why this cut-offness, or whether there can be in-touchness with the immense energies of this universe, which have nothing to do with this me ego cage. That is a separation from these energies. That's the cut-offness. One step outside of that, and the energies are there palpably, alive, and oneself not separate from it. Does the thought come up, how do I get there? That's EKG Thought again. Is it? Or does it just mean wondering? not knowing, not looking for methods here or in other places, but wondering about this human being, which is born of this universe, born of life, and yet cut off from life. Amazing, isn't it? Of feeling cut off. The tremendous power that thoughts can exert on this living organism called a human being. Because birds and deer don't feel cut off. I'm sure they don't. You just watch them. They fly and jump and feed. Run, hide, breed, build nests. Back at home in our house in suburbia, there is a duck in the sagebrush with a nest of eggs. First time I opened the window there, a duck flew out from under. Kyle mows the lawn, a duck flies off. Gee. But then he looked in the sage. We wondered, when a duck doesn't make sense in suburbia. There's no pond there. The swimming pools hadn't been filled yet. We don't have one, but neighbors. And I don't think duck feed on chlorinated swimming pools. How to get there? And it's got little eggs and it sits on them. Waddles across the lawn at times. This kind of unpremeditated life reaching right to your wall of a suburban split-level home. Because there's little rabbits there too. How they survive, goodness knows, because there are dogs around. They feed on the flowers and the grass. Why are we cut off? What cuts us off? Can we watch it, wonder about it, not condemn it, not trying to cut off the thoughts that cut us off? Just a new spirit of wondering and looking and listening at everything that's happening. Because this large brain with its possibility to project images is also part of this nature. It does strange things, very destructive things, but it has grown out of this whole thing of natural evolution. It's not my fault or your fault. That's another thought, is very detrimental. My fault that I think so much, or think of myself. No, it's the capacity of the brain to create thoughts about myself which we take for real. And cling to the feelings of little energy that they provide. Waking up out of a dream happens on its own. Are we dreaming? Are we awake? Listening to the sound of the saw, is that just that? Or is a dream going on about? Why does he have to cut at this time or whatever? Dream activity there may be. Same with someone sitting next to one, chewing noisily. Can there just be this listening to the sound of celery crunching. One doesn't even know what it is. As though a rare bird has landed next to one. With very rare sounds, only on very rare spots on this earth to be heard. Then we would all be ohing and awing like at the butterfly. And it's not, sometimes it's Zen, in Zen it's indicated you become the chainsaw, but you don't become the chainsaw. That's very painful. And I really mean it. I once drove in a car, we were nursing a car along through some very uninhabited territory in northern Canada. And the car was making an unbearable noise and chugging along. It could hardly get along, and it was still a couple hours till the next town where we hoped there would be a station. And I was sick. I really felt miserable. And it took quite a while till I realized I had become that car. I was going through all the contortions and grindings and frictions and then wondering whether there was another way of listening and feeling all of what was going on rather than becoming it. And it was. Not that the sound became pleasant music, but one wasn't that anymore. It was just an opening, simple, unidentified listening. We will end here for today.